Okay, listeners and viewers, welcome to Lip Service. Lip Service is the show about comics, well, which we call graphic adventures, and the people who read them, draw them, and everything, and all points in between. What makes us different is we don't talk about Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, all those people because they've already got all the they've got all their guts, so they got their audience. What we try to bring to you are the up and comers, the needles in the haystack, as it were. And it's our job, and we love it, to go out and go through that haystack. And if we get stuck in the ass, so be it. But we do find those needles. And our guest today is Marta Tannrikulu from Steampunk Originals. Marta, welcome to Lip Service.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay. So, Marta, what got you into this?
Into the Steampunk Originals?
Or well, into the overall fray, that the overall lunacy that we call comics.
Well, I was a big reader of the comic strips as a kid. Mm-hmm. Had to have my fix every day in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. And from there, I kind of became aware that some of the TV shows or movies I was watching were also tied to comics. Didn't really have a comic shop nearby mm-hmm. that I could visit, but you'd see some comics in places like the grocery store.
Right.
And occasionally in a bookstore, or better yet, a library. Mm-hmm. But I tended not to really pay a whole lot of attention to comics. Probably the first time I realized there was something really bigger out there that uh-huh. was a Calvin and Hobbes collection. And I was excited about that because my local paper didn't carry Calvin and Hobbes. Mm-hmm. The competitor did.
Right.
So I got a fix on that and went looking for more. And I guess that's my first real awareness.
Right. Okay. So, and it's funny that you should mention that because for us, as we had interviewed Joe Stanton, the original guy who actually, the current man who actually does Dick Tracy, and interviewing him was phenomenal. And he really brought to the fore the close relationship between the comic strip and and his larger cousin, the comic book. Because realistically, there isn't that much difference aside from a couple of pages and more panels,
Right. And then the dailies would have a mixture of comic strips that were ongoing, mm-hmm. like Dick Tracy, or, arcs, and then they pick up with another arc later.
Right.
And the ones that were one-offs, like gag strips.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. And the funny part about all that is realistically that for the major popular characters like Batman, Superman, even down to Spider-Man, even some issues of the Fantastic Four, each of them had their stint in the strip world,
Oh yeah, Spider-Man was on one of the ongoing ones, and
right.
I used to enjoy watching when a different artist would be put on and see how the same character would end up being drawn. It was
right.
fun.
Exactly. So then from here, when you graduated from Calvin and Hobbes, where did that lead you next?
Well, I had a long interval where I went away from a lot of things because I started a degree in science and I had less and less time to do reading that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So that was about the time I saw the Calvin and Hobbes collection, but I didn't really have money to go out and hunt for a collection for my own. So right. I just looked for where I could borrow one. So it was really a long time before I got back to comics. And I would say part of it was when I had switched from science to editing. And one of my clients had a graphic novel mm-hmm. script that he wanted me to edit. And I thought it was a lot of fun.
Okay.
And I thought, hey, you know what? This is what I've been missing.
Uh-huh.
So then I started hunting up things that I wasn't familiar with. Mm-hmm. So the Superman and Spider-Man,
Right.
those are fairly easy to find if you do know,
Right.
like I knew then, that there are comic shops around. And this was before digital, but not by much.
Right. Right.
And the other thing that I kind of become aware of is that outside of the United States, comics tend to be taken more seriously by more people.
Right.
And the first clue I had was an Italian friend who had a really big collection of Mickey Mouse comics. And at first I was kind of giggling about it because he was way too old to be, what I was picturing was Mickey Mouse cartoons. But those were actually very adult comics. They were all ages, but they dealt with pretty complex topics.
Right.
And it sort of suggested what else could be done with the medium besides pure entertainment. So I think it was a gradual awareness over time with different pieces coming together.
Right. Well, see, and there lies the difference between the here in the States versus everywhere else, and I had to say the corporate essence, as it were, here, just more how they have relegated what should be considered an art form here to nothing more than to some part of a stereotype and some marketing tool. Much to the chagrin of those people who are in this industry, and to a lot of people who spent their careers making a name for themselves, drawing, whatever, writing, or the case may be, to bring this art form to its highest potential.
Right. The power of marketing is really amazing.
Yeah, well, and there lies the whole thing. They look at it from a marketing standpoint, and not so much from a not so much from a true from an artistic standpoint, because I look at it as if they took it from an artistic standpoint, the marketing end of it would be fairly easy. It would pretty much sell itself by that time.
Right.
But but unfortunately, when you sit back and look at how I think the way Disney first started off, it was it was all oohs and ahs, but I think at the same time, on the back end, they didn't. I think it had Uncle Walt realized how the society would take what he was doing on the opposite end and just make it and see it as nothing more than a children's this, that, and the other. I think he would have probably taken a different approach.
Right.
So from there, so what got you involved with steampunk originals?
Well, I've been writing short comic scripts for a couple years, maybe not very many, but writing practice scripts and whatnot for a couple years before I first learned about the Facebook group for one of the volumes. And at that time, I was getting the itch to write more, but feeling like I kind of was out of ideas, but also, more importantly, out of any way of getting them produced. So short scripts I did because they were a way of practicing genres and getting short stories out, developing my storytelling skills, but also meeting artists and not burdening them with the world's longest graphic novel right off the bat. So, artists need an income.
Yeah.
And who am I to expect an artist to work for free with me with nothing to show? So what I liked about the Steampunk Originals is it seemed to be a very nice community where you could meet other artists, test out ideas, and actually have a large enough pool of people that you might find somebody who is interested in creating it with you.
Right. Okay. But so what were the obstacles that you saw that kind of talked you out of production of a comic?
Well, like I said, you have to have somebody really, really committed to your project. If, like me, you can't even draw a stick figure and have somebody figure out what it is. So a script is sort of a natural because you can at least explain what you're going for.
Right.
But without somebody who can do the art, I can only produce scripts, right?
Right.
So the limitation is finding somebody who likes the script, whether that's an artist or some small publisher who wants to line up an artist on your behalf.
Right.
And so those are the two options I pursued, plus a couple of very short ones that I hired an artist for through places like Digital Webbing.
Okay.
And they turned out okay, but my budget was very quickly gone.
Right. Yeah.
And at any rate, like I said, you want to have a strong script, and I'm quite sure a couple of my early scripts were pretty dismal.
Well, so from a writer's standpoint, because and it's funny that thanks to Mike of Steampunk Originals, I've been able to cover pretty much a whole entire gambit from editing to artistry. So now what I got to ask you as the writer for aspect of a comic book, and see that this is one thing that we're presenting a unique look to our audience, because for most folk, all they see is the finished product. Right. They see the pictures, they see the words, but they go woo and all that. My wife's over here going woo, and everything, but they don't see the blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah, the blood. So you heard it. The blood, sweat, and tears that goes behind it. And the funny part about it is the bigger boys. Yes, they've got umpteen people doing all this, and so yeah, they can spit it out in 30 days or less. But when it's just you. You or somebody else, that all of a sudden now your job is multiplied by 10, and like you said, on a short deadline, on a short budget. So from here, what tricks have you learned to make your process a lot easier?
Process.
I know that I know.
Yeah, that's difficult because there's so many things that go into process, and it does depend on the publication. Mm-hmm. Since I've done shorts for anthologies, I'm only one contributor, so one of the things I have to do in the process is make sure that the editor is interested, whether it's a pitch before I've written anything or a script. Right. And then the art has to be a good fit for the script. Or the story is, a good story can be ruined by bad art, and a so-so story can be raised to pretty good story with the right art. Right. So it's kind of a matter of figuring out what art styles might complement the script, and then making sure people stay on schedule, which is really difficult because these short scripts can be done in a short period of time. If somebody has downtime, they can be illustrated, in a couple weeks. But if they start getting a lot of commissions, for example, or get tapped to do
something else,
a really visible project,
right?
This 3-pager is going to wait and wait and wait. Yeah. And so you just have to ask up front what other things there are and what's a realistic schedule as opposed to the optimal schedule.
Right.
And a couple of the stories that I've wanted to contribute have been delayed by a couple volumes because the artist just simply couldn't fit it in, or there's been a right under the wire submission.
Right. Yeah.
And it's inevitable. Yeah. So you also have to, in your process, acknowledge that not everything is going to go forward on the expected schedule, and be okay with that.
Yeah, and therein lies one big, and you hit on several good aspects of it. And by the way, viewers / listeners, I should say viewers in this particular case, if you are watching live, we do have our Q&A open. So if all you gotta do is type in your question and to either me or to Marta, and we can answer on the fly. Also, if by chance you have a Twitter account, you can tweet. I keep on wanting to say twit, but I know that's not the proper syntax for it. You can tweet your question to Kiss Me Comix. That is our our Twitter identification, and so once you've gotten your script and everything, how quickly was your artist able to get your work drawn out?
Well, by now I've worked with several artists, and some of them are slow and some of them are amazingly fast. And I assume this has something to do with the different rates that artists work, but also what else they have to get done. And I'd say the shortest has been maybe 4 days for a 3-pager. Okay. Which is, I think, lightning fast.
Yeah, it is.
And I've also waited on a 5-pager for 9 months.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there lies the whole the trick of and I know from our end as a publisher, hiring people to do work. You hopefully when you're vetting out through this process, you find somebody who is pretty much compatible with what you want. And first of all, from a artistic standpoint, but also from a work ethic standpoint, So we here can truly say what we truly feel and understand what you've gone, what you have had to go through with that process. So with the project that's coming up with steampunk, could you tell us a little bit more about that, or is it out yet first? Because I know there's several.
The first 2 volumes are out, and there's a plan for 8 volumes, and the submissions for volume 8 are closing Monday.
Oh, tomorrow. Really? Yeah.
And each volume, I would say the competition probably gets a bit stiffer. I first heard about it at volume 2, fairly far into the production process.
Okay.
And I submitted a 2-pager that was accepted. And then the following volumes, some stories have rolled over and some stories were done when planned. And so far I've had pretty good luck getting the stories I've submitted into that particular one. Steampunk Originals has a little different take on steampunk than some of the others going around. It's less concerned with how things look steampunkish,
right?
As opposed to what if you had 1800s technology and societal expectations, etc., but it continued on,
right,
with no additional progress for another technological and social progress for another 200 years,
right?
So what would different places in the world or different professions or whatever look like? So it's more of an alternate future take,
right? And
you can just arbitrarily pick some culture that you think might have developed or some other development. Like my favorite is to figure out what historical event didn't happen the way it actually did that would have had that effect.
Okay.
And then write a story that's set in a world with that. And the stories don't have to have a really hugely developed story world. They just need, because they're short.
Right.
But they need to make sense. And so you could have something like airships because there were various kinds of air-driven balloons and whatnot already in existence in the 1800s, but you're not going to have a magical jet fighter,
right?
For example.
Yeah.
So to answer that, I've been trying to come up with something a little different for each one.
Okay. And for our audience, I'll give you a quick rundown about steampunk, because unless I hope that for most of you out there, you're pretty much comic book savvy. But for those of you who aren't, here, crash course here. There is something beyond superheroes. Okay, there you can go in almost in any direction. I mean, from converted to pre-verted. Okay. And all points in between. Now, steampunk, to me, if I had to correlate it, if those of you who know the anime, The Wings of Honiamis, that's steampunk. basically. You mix the past with the far out future, and you create a story, and then you've got steampunk. So and so how have you handled the competition? Like you said, as with this, it's because now the last volume is getting ready to wrap up. How have you been able to handle the competition and at the same time, sometimes not having your work being seen or rejected?
Right. Well, the process with each editor is different, but Mark Schneider, who's the editor for the Steampunk Originals line,
Yeah.
gives the option of reviewing material at any stage.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be a pitch, and he'll say, no, that doesn't fit our definition of steampunk.
Right.
Or he can look at a script and say, whatever. It's too long, it's too short, characters a week. We've already done that kind of story.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always looking for something original. And if I get favorable feedback at that point, and I still like the story, then I'll start either posting on the Facebook group looking for a collaborator, or try to think who I know might be a good fit for it and approach them.
Okay.
And on a couple of occasions, he said, nah, this just isn't going to work. And so I either shelve it or I figure out where else it might work better. Okay. And so as far as the competition, a lot of artists have things that they particularly want to draw. So if an artist says, I'm looking for this type of story, and I have an idea that would fit, I might pitch that kind of an idea.
Okay.
On the other hand, I know my scripts aren't full of lots of action and really cool looking technology and really wild characters. So I know I'm never going to be able to tempt an artist who likes drawing that best.
Right.
And then as far as submission time, it's just a matter of what Mike decides to pick up. So he's got an evaluation rubric. And, if he's told you ahead of time that your story's not terribly original, you're not going to rank high on that part of the overall evaluation.
Right.
But he also will have, if you want, looked at the art and said, this is a really strong art style. So, it's going to sort of rank high on that.
Right. I totally understand that. And Mike Schneider, thank you so much for all your help. You have given me so much content for this show, and I do have to apologize to you. I had to apologize to you now that the beautiful and totally awesome interview that we did some time ago was lost. I do believe that. I can shoot myself because, long story short, I was getting ready to prepare for our interview, and I'm like, well, you know what? I need to start gathering stuff up so I can start getting the shows out on a regular basis. Start going through it, and I'm like, where is it? It's not here. I'm checking minuscule folders here, minuscule folders there, and I'm like, don't tell me. Do not tell me. And then I'm like, okay, well, I remember I did it as a Google Hangout. So I go to the Google Hangouts and I'm going through and I'm like, okay, here's this date, where's the video? And I'm like, what the F? And then and now I'm realizing there is a difference between Google Hangouts and Google Hangouts on air. Yeah, if you do it as a Google Hangouts on air, the video is there. You can kick it out to YouTube, and it stays there until you do something with it. And either I did something with it and deleted it, or it got overwritten. So yeah, and I can just simply just right now. I'm like, yeah, and there's about 2 other people too. I'm like, well, there goes 3 weeks out the window. So it happens. I'm living and learning. And speaking of learning, what have you learned from these experiences with Mike and the Steampunk Originals? I think
it's gone on learning aside with right to one side. I've been working on a few other things, not as many. But I learned different things from different ones. So from Mike, I think I saw the opportunities for collaboration more, and then sort of clued in that Facebook actually is a fairly good place, or potentially a fairly good place, to find people who are interested in putting anthologies together of comics. And so I explored a little bit more and found a couple other anthologies that way. And I honestly would never have looked if I hadn't been aware of the Steampunk Originals Facebook pages. And as far as process, I think I saw more of the process of organizing large numbers of people and getting them all together with a target date. And I've done that for other types of projects, but for comics, it's interesting to see how much time is allowed and who's able to finish in that time and what the problems are. And also better ways to communicate with people when things maybe aren't working. Okay. And one of the things I love is when I'm working with artists, they're going off my script. And I try to keep it general enough that they have room to contribute something really great of their own. And if I micromanage, you get what you ask for and no more. But I'm constantly surprised by what people will read into the scripts and bring something new. So one of my scripts was set in Antarctica, and the idea was this really remote outpost that was very run down and really struggling. And the artist created it so that it looked like an armed camp. With barbed wire basically around and guards, and it worked. It wasn't what I had pictured, but it really worked well.
Right, and okay, which goes back to what I was figuring about the original process with because it is a partnership between you and the artist. Of course, it is as a partnership all across the board, but more so between artist and the writer. So what kind of script style do you use in order to make certain A, your artist gets it, and B, like you said, to where he or she doesn't feel constrained to...
Right. It's easier if I already know the artist, because then I know the kind of information that may not have been in my last script that he or she wanted. But I generally try to give some reference material for what certain things look like, especially if they're not well known or if they're period pieces. And then in the panel descriptions, I try to explain the effect I'm going for. So usually I'll talk about the specific reaction I'm looking for, or a facial expression, sometimes a gesture, and then I'll say somewhere on the script, if you have something better, go ahead and do it. So I may want a character to come across as really devastated. So I'll say that the character is devastated, but leave it up to the artist how to show that. And they'll usually come up with a really great way with body language to show that. And if I've set up a scene with 3 or 4 people in it, and I have dialogue later on, I may suggest a close-up on one of the characters, or a view of all 3. And occasionally an artist will drop 1 or 2 of them out. And that usually works because it focuses on the most important character there. And as long as it's been set up earlier where the other people are, balloons can show anybody else who's actually talking in the scene.
Right. So from here, where do you want to take your work next? Do you see yourself doing a graphic novel, or anything, or maybe even doing a big, huge one-shot?
I'd say on the short term, at least, I've got to be very conservative, and I love doing shorts because I can do all kinds of genres. And I can do upbeat stories, and I can do really gritty stories. And I seem to have now and then a gift that comes out of nowhere for something humorous. Who knows where. And I can't really sustain that kind of thing beyond 3 pages. So I think what I'd like to do looking into, say, next year is consider turning a couple of the shorter ones into a miniseries. I doubt I'll finish next year, but kind of investigate how that might be done. And then continue to do some more shorts to balance out. Like, I haven't done a fantasy story yet, so I think that might be fun. And perhaps collect a lot of the stories that are thematically similar, like a lot of one of the things with steampunk originals is that you retain ownership of your work.
Right.
So you can print it somewhere else. So I'm thinking maybe a collection of stories that are steampunk themed or alternate future themed, and then there'll actually be a collection of stories with different art and different kind of premises that do have one theme, in that they're all alternate history and they're all written by me. Now that probably wouldn't sell very well.
Well,
but it's something I'm thinking of.
Well, never say never, because you won't know until you put it out there. To be perfectly honest with you, because just as there are several thousand people publishing comics, there are a couple of billion people floating around. Look, half of them probably would never read, but you just don't know. So we can ready to wind this up. Where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Do you see yourself continuing this, or do you see yourself maybe going in a totally different direction, maybe screenwriting or something like that?
Right. Well, I'm probably older than the average new comics writer. So if you go much further than that, you're probably talking retirement. And that could open some different options. And so I'm trying to keep them open, either to do more or to do less or to do something different.
Okay.
And I think it'll depend on how creative I feel and how much I have that itch to write and how well the stories are received. So,
right.
like I said, a year to two, it's pretty easy. I'll just keep trying to do what I'm doing now and getting more things out, because I have a lot of stories in the queue that haven't been published yet. They've been accepted, but they're not available yet. And that should change a lot in the next year. Right.
Okay. Which makes sense. And speaking of receiving, how well has your work been received through Steampunk Originals and in general?
Well, I've only had one story that's been out. It's in volume 2 of Steampunk Originals. But I've got some other work out that's been places like Greyhaven.
Okay.
And the new Indie Comics Quarterly.
Okay.
And Indie Comics Magazine. So I get an idea from Indie Comics Magazine by how many sales there are. And it's a one-time print run. And I've got a whole stash of leftover ones that I can sell at conventions or whatever. But Indie Comics Quarterly has accepted, and its sister publication that works only with female creators.
Oh, okay.
I've had good luck placing with them too. And they've just started getting those printed maybe since September. Okay. And readily available. So again, it's a little early, but the editor there has said some nice things about a couple of mine, so I'm happy with that.
Well, that's good. Well, I mean, we all got to start somewhere, and so and actually, now that you're mentioning this, where can folks find your work?
Okay.
I mean,
let me give a website, because I have everything that's not quite out yet, but has been okayed on the same page. Cool. And then they can check out a couple of shorts that I put up a couple of years ago. It's Vision Entertainment, VIZYON entertainment.com, all one word. Okay.
And so, and Vision. Okay, and there, folks, see, this is what we're talking about. Even there's no such thing as being too big or too small. If you do the work, put your work out there and have the confidence in what you're doing. It may not be perfect, understandable, but if you're going through the process and you're learning from that process, and you're not thinking that you're the newest thing since sliced bread and you can poop gold, then you will be all right, because nobody out there knows it all. And even the oldest dog can learn a new trick. plain and simple. And so we have been talking to Marta Tannrikulu, a very talented up and coming writer. Okay, so and you can find a good hunk of her work at you can find some of her work at Steampunk Originals, and you can find some of it at the website she just mentioned. So, and what I will do is when this show goes up, I will put that link down or put it in as an annotation, so that way you can see more of Marta's work. Okay, and for those of you who are watching this, if you like what you see, comment, like it, subscribe. If there's something that you do like, let us know. Something you don't like, let us know. Because this show isn't about us, it ain't about me running my mouth. It's about you and your entertainment. And that's what we're trying to provide here. So Marta, thank you so much for being a guest on Lip Service.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, Captain Eric, I loved you so much, but you killed me. Why?
This book is rated for readers 17 and older. The Lucky Seven killed her husband. Now Serena Park as Serenade goes for justice. Her weapon, a super deadly poison of her own design.
They must pay. The bastards must pay.
The bodies start falling now.
They have to pay. Those bastards.
Serenade number 11, available now at the www.kissmecomics.com website, or get the app at Google Play or on iTunes.